Brett Klicka here from Spider Fit Kids, and today I want to share with you Spider Fit Kids' approach to developing young athletes and giving them the tools they need to perform, but also to be active and enjoy physical activity for life. Because really, as coaches, our primary goal with kids should be to get them active for life so they one day become active, healthy, happy adults who have active, happy, healthy families. So to tell you a little bit about where our approach came from, I began when at a young age I figured out, hey, I can enjoy what I do for work, so I started coaching soccer. And after that I went through college. After college I had the opportunity to be a coach at the Olympic Training Center with Olympic level athletes. I went there, I went on to work with professional athletes in the private sector, and then I returned to where my heart really is, and that's working with kids, because I've always seen the greatest opportunity lies with kids, the greatest opportunity to truly make an impact. And in my work with kids over the years, I started to, because we get this education in school and through our certifications and sort of some old school information, and with this idea of where we need to start with kids, the assumptions of where they're coming from, and we try to go from there. And so I would take kids in. We're supposed to start with the fundamental movement skills. And so kids would come to work with me and we'd be working on skipping and shuffling and all those different things. And I was finding, man, these kids can't do it. These kids can't jump rope. These kids can't shuffle. They can't skip. They can't crawl. They can't do rhythmic activities. And so we were getting really frustrated on both sides. And when I'm talking about kids, I'm not just talking about deconditioned kids. I'm talking about young athletes that have been so specialized they haven't developed this whole toolbox. And so I went to the drawing board, and I realized that we have a little bit of a problem right now. We're making too many assumptions with many of our approaches, working with not only young athletes, because today I'm going to talk about things in context of age, but quite frankly, a responsible coach talks about things in context of training age. So if I have a 7-year-old stud or studette who can do everything, well, I can advance them. But if I have a 15-year-old that really can't do much of anything and that they can't move well and do all that, I'm not just going to progress them based on age. But so look at what we're currently doing, and this is where we're making some mistakes. And it's not our fault. This is what we've been told. So we start with this good foundation of fundamental movement skills. So we build this house of fundamental movement skill, and this is a good foundation for movement for the rest of our life, right? Because the assumption, and by the way, fundamental movement skills, I'm talking about stationary movement control, locomotion skills, manipulative skills, and these are the skills that forever have been what we've taught in physical education. It's what kids have developed while they're playing. Well, here's the thing. Again, kids developed these while they were playing. What do we know about play now? We know that kids aren't playing the way they're supposed to. 1 in 5 kids gets the required amount of physical activity on any given day. Kids spend their time with technology. We know that. Or they go into a sport, which is great, but just because they're in a sport doesn't guarantee that they're learning all kinds of different physical skills, because 3% of American schools have daily physical education. I mean, that is tragic. So kids aren't really having the opportunity to learn. So while we think we're building this great foundation, the problem is the foundation's no good unless it's sitting on some good ground. If I create a foundation on sand, I'm going to be in trouble. So this is where play is always coming in. We call this play, and I'll talk about more what play actually is at a neurological level in a moment. But play created this ground. Now think of what ground is made up of. I mean, ground is almost infinite little particles and so many things. It's sand, it's dirt, it's so many little things that come together. And when kids would spend hours outside playing, they were developing all kinds of skills that were the true foundation for them to be able to apply these skills to more fundamental movements, more specific skills. And once they get comfortable with these, then we start to move into more applied movement skills. All right, so applied movement skills, maybe that's for a sport, maybe that's for an activity that you want to do for the rest of your life. But where we've missed the boat here is we've just assumed that kids are playing, and we start day one, assessing how far can you jump, how high can you jump, how fast can you run. We are still going to assess those things, and those are still great things to assess. But the problem is, when our assessments, we look at the Presidential Fitness Test, we know what that assessment's going to tell us. It's just a downward decline over time. So the question I had was, well, where can we deconstruct this down to the most basic level to start to build it back up so we're not just seeing this decline? And the number one question I had then, okay, well, what is play? Do I just say, okay, well, just have the kids play more? Well, that's a tough approach because kids aren't going to play on their own anymore, unfortunately. Academic standards, academic rigor has gone way up. Kids have more homework. We have more pressure in sports, more sports time. Kids don't even know what to do. We live in cities now. I live in a suburb, but I'm not going to let my daughter go run around in the streets. So kids don't have the opportunity to play like they once did. So as coaches and as fitness mentors, we have to facilitate play. Well, what does that mean? Do we just show up every day and we just keep making up, okay, now do this, okay, now do this? Well, so in looking into this, I had a big question of what is play? And so I talked to child development specialists, I talked to physical education teachers and classroom teachers and occupational therapists, and I realized that play isn't just stuff. Important things are happening during play, particularly when we look at sensory skills, also known as perceptual motor skills. You realize that our ability to use our senses to take in feedback from our environment is extremely important if we're going to ever develop mental, cognitive, or physical skill. We need to be able to look at something visually, take in that information, do something about it. We need to take in something from auditory, take in that information, do the right thing about it proprioceptively. We have to have body awareness. We have to have all these different things. So I went on to define those. So I said, okay, if we're going to teach kids how to play, if we're going to create this ground that we can put the fundamental movement skills on, let's look at the basic perceptual motor skills. And we're talking about body awareness, directional awareness, spatial awareness, temporal awareness, that's rhythms, tactile awareness, auditory, can they hear, can they react to different things like that, proprioceptive. All right, so how many do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 9 of these. My brain's good for remembering a couple. I wrote these down so don't forget. Let's see, direction, vestibular awareness and visual. All right, vestibular and visual. Okay, so these right here, these make up our sensory system. So our body awareness, can we identify our body parts and what they do? Direction, do I know up, down, right, left? Do I know global directions? Do I know directions based on what I see? Or can I tell directions based on somebody coming at me, what their perception is? Spatial awareness, do I know how much room my body takes up? Do I know how much room is available around me? Temporal awareness, can I syncopate a rhythm? Can I syncopate a beat? Can I look at a field and understand the rhythms of what's going on? Tactile, do I know what to do with touch? If I get tapped on the arm, do I think somebody is trying to attack me? Auditory awareness, can I not only hear, but can I tell directions of what sounds are coming from? Proprioceptive awareness, do I know, are my joints able to give me feedback as to where my body is in space? Vestibular awareness, does the inner workings of my head, can it tell me and orient me where my head is in space? That's very important. And also visual awareness, not only can I see, but can I focus, can I track, can I do all these different things? So these are what make up that foundation, our sensory skills. And what we'll find when kids, once I started to look at developing kids through this lens versus just, well, this kid's fast, this kid's slow, this kid can skip, this kid can't skip. Once I started to realize, well, if a child can't do something, there's usually a pretty good reason behind it. And with the inactivity in today's kids and the over-specialization in sports, usually that reason is they just haven't been exposed to enough things. So then as a coach, I'm looking, okay, so as my approach, I would like to start facilitating these different things. So I started to look at activities. Well, what activities are there that focus on visual? What are activities that focus on auditory? So we created all these games and activities. And so now when I look at a child, when we're able to look at children either playing in a game or doing an activity or doing a drill, it's not just a matter of learning a specific movement pattern. I'm looking to see, okay, really, how are they responding direction? How are they responding to different things? And I'm able to tell if something is wrong, I'm able to tell, okay, how can I fix it? So what does that mean for program design? So I look at a program design, I think, okay, if I could hand off this child, if I get a kid at 6 years old, 7 years old, whatever it is, or I get a really deconditioned or just an uncoordinated kid at 15 or an adult at 45 that hasn't done anything for a long time, how can I give them the toolbox they need so that I can hand them off to another coach, or I can start to facilitate the next level where we're not just moving, we're actually training. So okay, what tools do they need? Well, obviously they need all those perceptual motor skills. So I said, well, what would this mean for my training? So I'm looking, if I'm working with kids, sort of in that age of those young kids, most kids won't go to a coach or a trainer, they'll go to a teacher, but usually somewhere in that 6 to 10 range, this is definitely an approach, all right? This is definitely an important part of the approach. I'll write that a little bit lower so you can see it, 6 to 10. All right, so first, when kids show up, we're gonna do an instant activity. So I'm just gonna put IA. So that's more of a group management thing from a day-to-day training. They show up, but we're not gonna stand in lines. I'm not gonna give my coaches pep talk right out of the go. We're gonna do something that's moving. But here's the thing. Remember I said I don't want us to take games and just throw games. I'm gonna look and say, okay, I'm gonna do this visual game. Because as we're playing these games and doing these instant activities or whatever it is, I'm constantly assessing. I'm constantly looking and seeing, okay, I know that this game really focuses on visual focus. It's visual tracking. It's auditory awareness. I know what's behind these games. By the way, we have a lot of these games on the SpiderFit Kids website at spiderfitkids.com. But if we look at some of these games, I know what I'm looking for. And if I see a child that consistently struggles, anytime we do a proprioceptive type of drill where they have to be able to identify where they're at in space, and I can see they struggle, or they're constantly delayed when I'm blowing a whistle, they don't respond really well to auditory cues, or visually, they have trouble catching a ball. But it's not just trouble catching a ball, is if the ball comes close to them, are they always backing away? Well, that could be that the macula, the retina is not formed yet. So you can see the importance of understanding all these sensory skills. It gives me a great lens to look through as a coach. So we'll do an instant activity for about 5 minutes. And then after that, we'll go into our dynamic warm-up. Now here's how we structure the dynamic warm-up. Again, we want to start, it's not like I'm not introducing fundamental movement skill. It's not like I'm not showing them how to squat and skip and shuffle and all that. We're still doing that. But my focus is to see, okay, am I giving them the underlying foundation that they need to truly dial in those skills? So during our warm-up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the basics. We're gonna take shuffling and skipping and even some calisthenics, some stationary movement control, balance, push-ups, squats, whatever they are. We're gonna do those, but then we're gonna add some little side, we call them movement variables to that. So we might squat, we'll squat fast, we'll squat slow. We'll squat with the legs asymmetrical. We'll squat with one arm in the air. We'll squat with two arms in the air. We'll squat narrow. We'll squat wide. Again, what we're doing is we're giving this neural feedback through the body to the child's brain so they can kind of figure out how it all fits. So instead of me standing there and drilling the perfect squat into their head, I'm gonna kind of let them figure that out over time. Squat with your hips forward, squat with your hips back. Over time, they start to develop this context for their body, which is very important because, again, these kids aren't climbing trees and throwing dirt clods and spending hours and hours every day developing these skills. We have to develop the dirt, which they put their foundation on. So we do our dynamic warm-up. Usually that takes 5 to 10 minutes. It's fun. We put some imagination words in there. We'll say, okay, everybody zip, pop, drive, and they got to put those movements together. I want to see how their brain talks to the body, and sometimes they need to be able to do that for themselves. Now, after we do this, then we'll do a game. Again, I'm looking through the lens. If I have very deconditioned kids, if I have very young kids, I'm looking through the lens, not so much of who has the best VO2, who's the fastest, who jumps the highest, whatever. I'm looking to see, okay, when we play this game, I know that this game is a tactile-based game. They have to put hands against another partner and they need to move based on what their partner's doing, so no proprioception and tactile awareness is very important. I'm gonna look and see, man, this child keeps struggling. So if I see a child who keeps struggling with something, there's a couple things that we can do. For one, if they're really struggling, if there appears to be no improvement, or if there appears to even be pathology, they can't hear, they have trouble seeing, I'm gonna talk to a parent. Because that's really where we need to be able to give these kids a little more help. Maybe it's an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, maybe it's some more time one-on-one with us. But if we can get these kids help at a young age, they're gonna spare frustration at an older age. So we'll play this game again. I'm constantly assessing. I'm looking at this game. I understand why I'm playing that game based on these perceptual motor skills. I know what we're looking for. kids just think it's fun. So the kids are doing that. Then we'll go to, this is where we're kind of training. This is where we get to our circuits. This might be obstacle courses. We're kind of training here. It's a 20-minute, maybe a 30-minute block, depending on how old your kids are. And so while we're doing this is where we're starting to say, okay, here's where we're going to practice the fundamental movement skills. We're going to practice stationary movement control. We're going to practice locomotion skills. We're going to practice striking and kicking. Again, this is at a young age, but even at an older age, a lot of these kids are so specialized now that they need this type of work. So I'll look at this, and then it comes down to, okay, well, what do we work on here? Do we just do everything all the time? So I had to go back to the drawing board. Say, okay, remember, my goal here at these young ages, or really deconditioned youngsters, is to give them the toolbox they need to feel comfortable moving on. And so we looked at, okay, what are the basic things that we think they should be able to do? Well, a wall, so I'm going to take right here, wall squat. And we call these our core four, wall squat. Again, facing a wall. I want to see, can they go down, and we don't always have a wall to work with, but can they go down, head up, chest up, about at least a hand from the wall, closer if possible. Can they go down, keep their body oriented? It just gives the kids great feedback. We'll do isometrics, we'll do all kinds of different things, but it gives them great feedback. If they can squat well, they're going to be able to jump well. Their deceleration mechanics are going to be great. Instead of overwhelming them, we're going to stick to the basics. And they can ace these things, they can move on. All right, hip hinge, second of the core four. All right, so hip hinge, again, can they hinge over at the hip, come back up? All of these, we can build these up too. If we go in a child count wall squat, then we can build that up. There's different things we can do. But also realize that there might be a child that we tell, okay, come on, get your ankles back, get your ankles back, get your hips back, pull your toes up. They may not have the proprioception or body awareness to be able to do that. So if you're giving cues to a child and you realize they just don't seem to be able to pick it up, there could be an auditory issue, there could be a body awareness issue, there could be a proprioceptive issue. So as we play the other games, I know the different skills I'm looking for, all of a sudden I realize, yeah, anything we do with proprioception that child struggles with. So again, conversation with the parent, maybe it's different drills, different activities for that child. All right, so we're working on the hip hinge. Again, because extension is an important pattern, kids now, they sit like this all day long. We can also go down to like a Superman position, but that hip hinge, then a standing plank. Now, again, these are things that we have found that are important. If I can build these, I've seen these just go the course. I can build anything based on these. And some people might say, well, why not the push-up? Well, with strength to weight ratios now, very few kids can do any form of decent push-up. That doesn't mean I'm not just letting them loose. I'll say, hey, do 10 push-ups. Just do it. Do them fast, do them slow, legs wide, arms narrow, arms offset, whatever it is. But when we're working on these skills, so I may have 5 stations, 2 of the stations we're working on some sort of stationary movement control. But the standing plank, think about everything that's going on in the standing plank. So if I can hip hinge, well, I can deadlift, I can kettlebell swing, Olympic lift, there's so many things I can do. I can have good orientation for rows, all that. Well, if I can do a standing plank, that means, if I do it well, that means I can create tension in my anterior core. I can create tension through my hips. I have an understanding of grip into the ground. Shoulder blades, that's a big problem when we look at shoulders and even push-ups. Watch all the kids you work with at any age or adults do push-ups. Most of them sag through the upper body. Their shoulder blades come slamming together. There's no control through the shoulders. If we can't control our shoulder blades, we're going to have problems on down the line with their shoulders and all kinds of different things. So in a standing plank, we're looking to see, okay, what's going on here? Can they hold a standing plank? And more kids are able to actually do it versus, okay, this kid does 50 push-ups, this kid does 2 push-ups. The standing plank is where we go. And then we just go from there. And finally, the skip. So these are going to be right here, a core 4, and we're going to move on from there. So why the skip? Why don't I choose something else? Well, if a child can't skip, if they don't have the temporal, if they don't have the rhythmic awareness to skip, if they don't have the contralateral, if they can't cross right, left, and move the way they're supposed to, if they don't know where to put their feet into the ground to skip, it's going to be very difficult to improve running. their running is going to be inefficient. And it's amazing. I'll show up to do a speed work with a high school or something like that, and half the kids can't skip, yet they're dragging tires and they're doing everything that their coach has apparently seen on YouTube, and they can't do the basics. So once they get these basics down, and what I mean by getting it down is we just use a simple scale, a 1 to 4. So I'm looking at a 1 to 4. A 1 is pathology. All right, so there's an injury, there's a complete incapability. It's like they can't even hear you. Now this is serious. Pathology is going to be, we're going to refer out. Pathology, I'm almost concerned they're going to hurt themselves. A 4 is, you're putting that in a textbook. That's a showcase. A 4 is perfect. We don't have to get kids to 4s. What we want to do is we want to get them from 2s to 3s. So a 2 would mean that, well, a 2 are in trouble. You know, a 2, they're not in trouble, but they just don't get it. They're inconsistent. They can't they consistently are inconsistent. They get the idea, they're trying, but we realize with time it's going to improve. A 3 means they got the basic tenets of it. They continue to see improvement. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. So again, formatively, just assessing these things. You can do it formally where you have each child come in, or if you have 5 or 6 kids, we're just constantly seeing how they're doing on these things, different variations of this. Okay, so that's what we do here. Then from the circuit, we go back into a game. All right, so back into a game, making it fun. Again, looking at the perceptual motor skills. We know why we're doing a specific game. We're assessing during that game. We're making little manipulations to the rules and things like that in that game. And then finally, we're going to do a challenge of the day. Now, kids at a young age, conditioning is very important. Teaching kids to overcome adversity. When it hurts, keep going. That's an important part about sports, but really life. But to get kids right at an early age to see it as a personal challenge, instead of calling it conditioning, okay, what's our challenge today, coach? Okay, our challenge is this. And this is where we're going to ratchet it up a little bit. And this is where we're going to add some repetition. They're not necessarily going to be perfect through here, but this is where they're just going to challenge themselves. It's a teaching moment. And then after that, we're going to cool down. Okay, now the cool down, realize that we've stretched for so long, and stretching is very important. But what I've gotten more into now, and I advise other people, is teaching kids how to breathe. Teaching kids how to breathe. If we want them to have a life skill, we want them to have a sports skill, if we want them to be able to create tension in sports, if we want to be able to maintain relaxation, focus, proactive thought, the parasympathetic nervous system, we need to teach kids how to breathe. So after a workout, we'll do something maybe like a perceptual motor skill type thing where we work on everybody close their eyes. Who can hear the furthest thing away? Well, they don't know it, but they're meditating. They're being very quiet. And then we'll go into working on some breathing. We'll talk about what their homework is. I want to give them something when their parents show up to pick them up. That's a golden opportunity. I want things to be fresh in their heads. So when mom or dad says, "What did you do today?" they blurt it out instead of saying, "I don't know." Because parents know kids are going to say, "I don't know." But if they don't say that and they're excited enough to say something, then the value of the program is going to increase. So you can see on a day-to-day basis, again, what we're trying to do is creating a foundation through play, but then defining play. What does it mean? Well, if we can develop these sensory motor skills, these perceptual motor skills through play, we're going to have a greater foundation to build fundamental movement skills and finally apply these fundamental movement skills to whatever activity that child wants to do for the rest of their life. So again, this approach kind of goes, this is how we build. I don't care the age of athlete I work with, some aspect of this is in there. Now, once they're getting to 3s, I feel good about their perceptual motor skills. They're getting to at least 3s on these. We're going to progress. I mean, the wall squat's going to progress. The hip hinge, we're going to do different hip variations. The plank turns into push-ups. It turns into all kinds of bench press, dumbbell bend, whatever it is. The skipping, multi-directional movement, multi-directional skipping. We turn deceleration mechanics, acceleration mechanics. But I want to make sure that whether they keep working with me or I hand them off to a high school coach or they hand them off to whoever I'm handing them off to, that they have this basic toolbox and they can go from there. So that's our approach. We've had a lot of success with young kids, deconditioned kids, and even high-level athletes who think that just because they're great at their sport, we all know what I'm talking about, that they're great athletes. So give this a try. Start looking at things through the lens of these perceptual motor skills, particularly when you're having kids that seem to be doing well in one area, but they're struggling. If a child struggles with a skill, start to look and see why. What can you do? What can you address to help them not struggle? So for more information, go to www.spiderfitkids.com. Again, I'm Brett Klicka, co-creator of SpiderFit Kids. I look forward to helping you create a future of happy, healthy, active adults and families. I'll see you soon.